You awaken before the sun, the desert chill clinging to your skin. In the half-light, the statue of a goddess glistens with a sheen of condensation, as though she weeps for the coming day. Her marble eyes seem alive, watching, waiting, caught between tenderness and wrath. In the silence, you feel it. Devotion that smells of perfume and blood, of prayers whispered not in fear, but in longing. Before we descend into the temples of Babylon, a quick pause. If this story has already pulled you into its shadowed beauty, take a second to like this video. It helps this history reach others wandering through the sands of time. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, whether from the quiet hum of a New York night, the rains of Manila, or the deserts not far from where Babylon once stood. Together, we are a circle of travelers, uncovering the stories buried beneath the world's oldest dust. In the heart of Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates, life clung to the generosity of water and the cruelty of the sun. It was here that humanity first wrote its prayers into clay. Every harvest, every child, every river's rise or fall was a question to the divine. The Babylonians believed that creation itself was an act of passion, a union between heaven and earth that had to be continually renewed, and presiding over this balance of beauty and ruin was Ishtar. She was not born in Babylon. Her name first echoed in Sumer as Inanna, Queen of Heaven. Her hymns called her the bringer of life, yet the destroyer of men. One inscription from the city of Uruk reads, "She stirs confusion among men, yet she gives them joy. She is both the torch and the flood." The paradox was the point. To the ancient Mesopotamian mind, life and death were not opposites. They were partners in an eternal dance. When Babylon rose under Hammurabi and later under Nebuchadnezzar, Ishtar's cult became its spiritual core. Her temples towered over the city, wrapped in blue-glazed bricks and carved lions, her sacred animals. At dawn, her priests lit censers of frankincense as the first rays of light struck her golden idol. They said the goddess demanded not just offerings of grain or incense, but of emotion, desire, devotion, and sometimes even despair. Ishtar's myth told of her descent into the underworld, a story both terrifying and tender. In it, she strips away her jewels and robes at each of the 7 gates until she stands naked before her sister, the queen of the dead. Her descent brought sterility to the world above. Her return restored its fertility. Each year, her worshippers reenacted this drama to ensure that life would continue. The ceremony reminded them that creation demanded sacrifice, that even the goddess of love had to die to be reborn. Her priests and priestesses understood the nuance of her duality. They painted her as a woman whose kiss could bring either life or destruction. In temple carvings, she is shown armed with a bow, yet draped in silk, her hair braided for war, her lips parted for song. To her followers, sensuality was not sin. It was sacred energy, a reflection of the cosmic union between gods and mortals. Love was not shameful. It was the mechanism of the universe. And yet, love under Ishtar was never safe. Ancient tablets warn, "She who exalts you will bring you low. She will make a lion into a lamb, and a lamb into a wolf." For warriors, she was invoked before battle as a force of courage and fury. For lovers, she was the keeper of desire's flame. Both prayed for her favor, both feared her temper. She was the pulse of Babylon itself, beautiful, unpredictable, and alive. One priest's hymn, recovered from a temple archive, pleads with her, "Lady of the morning, fierce daughter of the moon, spare your servant, though he trembles in your light." The clay tablet bears the faint impression of a thumbprint, as if the scribe himself hesitated before inscribing her name. That hesitation captures everything about Ishtar: awe mixed with terror, reverence with vulnerability. As centuries passed, her rituals grew elaborate. Her followers danced through the city streets in processions of perfume and music, carrying symbols of fertility: pomegranates, doves, and lotus blossoms. The people celebrated the union of gods and men through sacred drama, through offerings of touch and sound. The air shimmered with heat and incense, and from the ziggurat, the high priestess looked down upon the city that pulsed in rhythm with her goddess. But as Babylon's wealth grew, so did its fragility. Ishtar's dual nature became a warning as much as a blessing. Love could bring fertility, but also chaos. Desire could crown a king or ruin him. The Babylonians knew that what gives life can just as easily take it away. Their goddess, after all, was not merely a symbol of passion. She was passion itself, untamed, uncontrollable, divine. And so, as the first stars emerged above the Euphrates, her priests prepared the sacred oils. Drums echoed softly through the temple corridors. A hush fell upon the city. Somewhere beyond the gates, the king himself waited, knowing that by dawn he would offer his body not to pleasure, but to the goddess who demanded both love and blood. The ritual was about to begin. The king's hands trembled as he dipped them into a basin of rosewater. Petals floated on the surface, trembling with each distant beat of the drums below. Through the open window, the night breathed with heat and incense. From the streets, far beneath the ziggurat, the sound of the crowd rose like a tide, chanting the goddess's name. He lifted his wet hands to the torchlight. The droplets looked like blood. At the summit of Babylon's great temple, the Etemenenki, the most secret of rites was about to begin. To outsiders, the ziggurat was a mountain of stone. To the Babylonians, it was a stairway between the human and the divine. Its upper chamber, known as the Bit Ili, was said to mirror the celestial bedchamber of Ishtar herself. Every surface shimmered in dim torchlight. Walls of lapis lazuli, carved lions and doves, and hanging strands of gold thread that swayed gently with the night wind. On the floor, the air smelled of myrrh and burning cedar. At the center of that chamber stood a woman, tall, radiant, her body anointed with sacred oils. She wore a crown of silver leaves and a necklace of blue stones that caught the flickering light. She was not to be addressed by her mortal name tonight. For this single night she was the goddess, her breath divine, her touch cosmic. The hymns written for her called her Nin Shubur, the pure lady of the temple. The ceremony began with purification. The king laid aside his crown, his sword, the insignia of conquest. A servant brought forward a bowl of clear water drawn from the Euphrates, its surface stirred with drops of honey. He washed his face and hands, repeating words inscribed in the temple tablets. "I am cleansed of the dust of men. I come before the goddess pure." The high priestess watched in silence. When he finished, she raised her hand and spoke softly. "Let the shepherd approach the gate of heaven." Each phrase, each gesture, carried layers of meaning. The Babylonians believed that the king embodied the land itself, his strength, the fertility of the soil, his weakness, the drought. The priestess, in turn, embodied Ishtar, the cosmic force of creation. Their union was no act of passion alone. It was theology made flesh, a living reenactment of the first act of creation when heaven and earth embraced and life began. He stepped forward. The drums slowed, their rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat. The priestess lifted a cup of date wine and poured it onto the floor, a libation to the goddess. "May the rivers of life flow," she whispered. The king knelt and touched his forehead to the ground. Then, rising, he met her gaze. In that gaze, power shifted. For this moment, the ruler of Babylon was no longer a sovereign of men but a supplicant before divinity. As the ritual progressed, music echoed faintly through the temple corridors below. Harps, flutes, and low chanting. Servants scattered petals across the stone floor. The air thickened with incense until it was hard to tell where breath ended and smoke began. The priestess began the invocation, her voice rising in melodic cadence. "Lady of heaven, great Ishtar, lover of gods and kings, descend and bless this union." The chant was ancient, older than Babylon itself. Clay tablets recovered from Uruk preserve fragments of its verses, the syllables curved like the flow of the river that sustained them all. Outside, the city waited in silence. Thousands had gathered at the base of the ziggurat, watching torches flicker at its peak. They could not see what occurred within, but they believed that their fates depended on it. The coming of the rains, the ripening of grain, the survival of their children. For them, this night was not a spectacle but an offering, the hinge upon which the coming year would turn. Yet, behind the divine poetry of the rite lay the careful hand of politics. The sacred marriage was a spectacle of legitimacy. When the king emerged at dawn, crowned again, the people would not merely see a ruler, they would see a man chosen and sanctified by the goddess herself. His power, sealed in flesh, would be beyond mortal challenge. The priesthood, too, reinforced their dominion, intermediaries between heaven and earth, guardians of ritual and law. Some tablets hint that not every participant entered the chamber with faith alone. A fragment from the city of Sippar records a priest's uneasy line. He smiles as though blessed, but his eyes are afraid. Perhaps even the king wondered whether Ishtar's love might turn to rage, whether her favor could be trusted. After all, the same goddess who blessed lovers also tore down empires. As the night wore on, the final stage approached. Revelation. The flames burned low, the chanting softened. The king and the priestess stood together beside the sacred bed, its frame of cedar and its sheets embroidered with symbols of stars and rivers. A final libation was poured, the air stilled. The union that followed was not spoken of afterward. It was an act beyond language, part prayer, part contract, part surrender. And then, silence. When dawn came, the priestess emerged first, her garments streaked with oil and ash, her face pale but calm. Behind her, the king stepped into the new light, the crown once more upon his brow. The crowd erupted in cries of joy. The drums thundered. Flowers rained from balconies as the people rejoiced, believing the goddess had accepted the offering, that life would flourish again. Yet, high above the cheers, the temple chamber remained quiet. The torches flickered out one by one. Only the faint scent of rosewater lingered, sweet, heavy, and fleeting. What the goddess had truly demanded that night, no one would ever know. The desert wind whispered through what remained of Ishtar's temple. The once glazed tiles, blue as the evening sky, were now faded to dust. Between the toppled columns, a single lion relief stared blindly across the sands, a guardian with nothing left to protect. The city that had once proclaimed itself the gate of the gods had fallen silent. No incense, no music, only the wind, carrying echoes of prayers the earth had long since swallowed. Centuries had passed since Babylon's towers pierced the clouds. The Persians came first, their banners glittering under the sun. They stripped the temples of gold and declared the old gods powerless. Then came the Greeks, who marveled at the ruins and spoke of them as wonders and warnings. But it was in the words of Babylon's enemies that the city's true afterlife began. The Israelites, exiled in the shadow of Babylon's walls, remembered it not as a city of light, but of sin. In their scriptures, the sacred rites of Ishtar became abominations, her temple servants recast as harlots. The holy marriage, once a covenant of creation, was rewritten as blasphemy. To them, Babylon was not merely an empire, it was a symbol of everything that stood against divine order. The whore of Babylon, in the book of Revelation, would one day embody the sum of human corruption, a direct echo of these ancient rituals, stripped of context and sanctity. Why did this transformation occur? Perhaps because Babylon's theology was too intimate, too fearless in its embrace of human desire. A faith that saw divinity reflected in the body, not apart from it, was a threat to emerging religions built on restraint and moral control. To worship through touch, to honor the goddess through pleasure, was to challenge the idea that holiness must come through denial. And so Ishtar, once Queen of Heaven, was exiled from memory. Her likeness was shattered, her name smeared with the language of sin. Yet her shadow endured. When early Christian writers sought to condemn Rome's decadence, they reached instinctively for her image. "Babylon the Great," they wrote, "the mother of prostitutes and of abominations of the earth." They never knew how close those words came to describing the goddess herself, mother of creation, not corruption. For centuries, the ruins lay buried. The Ishtar Gate, half submerged beneath layers of sand and time, waited for rediscovery. When German archaeologists uncovered it in the early 20th century, the world was stunned. The deep cobalt bricks gleamed once more under the desert sun. Lions, dragons, and bulls marched in eternal procession, their outlines sharp against the dust. These were not the relics of a depraved cult, but the architecture of faith and power, built by hands that believed beauty itself was an offering to the gods. Fragments of clay tablets soon followed. Among them, hymns to Ishtar, written in careful cuneiform. One read, "You are she who brings the dead to life, who fills the womb and the field alike." Another, from a temple archive, described the sacred marriage not as indulgence, but as duty. In union, the heavens open and the rains descend. Through the embrace, life returns to the earth. These were not the words of a civilization lost in lust, but of a people who believed that desire, rightly honored, sustained the cosmos. Archaeologists also unearthed the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the goddess first appears not as villain, but as a figure of power and rejection. When Gilgamesh spurns her advances, he does so in fear, because every man who lay with her was transformed, consumed by her divinity. That fear, perhaps, has never left us. Across cultures, the power of female sexuality, especially when tied to the sacred, has been rewritten as danger. Ishtar became Eve, then Lilith, then Babylon's nameless harlot, an inheritance of fear masquerading as morality. And yet, the stones themselves remember differently. Walk among the ruins of Babylon at dusk, and the air still carries a sweetness, the scent of baked earth and something faintly floral, as if the ghost of incense refuses to fade. Historians can measure the city's fall, date the fires that consumed it, trace the empires that rose from its ashes, but they cannot measure what lingered, the memory of a civilization that dared to see the body as divine scripture. What does it mean that the oldest stories of creation begin not with law, but with love? That once humanity believed the joining of flesh could mirror the union of stars? Babylon's conquerors buried those ideas, but they did not destroy them. They resurfaced in myths of Aphrodite, in whispered legends of temple priestesses, in art that celebrates the curve of form as much as the reach of spirit. The goddess who loved and killed never truly vanished. She simply changed her name. As the sun sinks over the Iraqi plains, the camera lingers on the broken gate of Ishtar. Sand swirls through its open archways like time itself, erasing and revealing in the same breath. Somewhere beneath the dunes, more tablets wait, more fragments of a truth once forbidden. And as night falls over Babylon's ruins, one can almost hear it, a faint rhythm, like distant drums, echoing through the dust. The sound of a city that once believed love could hold the heavens together.